So Francis Ngannou's big contract, big announcement has been revealed, and he is going back to the sand mines to work there until he dies. I'm joking, of course. What's actually happened is he has signed a big contract with PFL, a smaller MMA promotion outside of the UFC, and I just want to run through this contract quickly and summarise why I think it's a little bit of a fuck up and how in the long run I believe Francis Ngannou has indeed lost. In the big scheme of things, of course, when you compare, what he had in mind when he first started bickering back and forth with Dana, as opposed to what he's got now. You know, what he's got now is a good thing, but is it what he wanted? That's what I'm going to look into. Now, obviously, I won't go over this history for too long. And Ngannou had been going back and forth with Dana for quite some time since he got the heavyweight belt off of Stipe, and that's where this all sort of began. And there was issues about his salary, his payment, his representation in the organisation. There were numerous meetings between him and Dana back and forth, and eventually they decided to. Ngannou decided to leave the UFC as of January this year. He turned down a deal from the UFC in January of this year that promised him, his contract promised that he would be the highest paid heavyweight in UFC history. And now, for a scope of things, when you get the money involved in that, Brock Lesnar made well over $5 million throughout his UFC career. So I reckon that, in the long scheme of things, Ngannou would have made, I reckon, in worst case scenarios, in the high 6 millions, low 7 millions, I reckon, Ngannou would have been making bank off of that contract. And that's all we really know about it, and I'm sure as Ngannou carried on defending that belt under that contract, that pay would have increased. So that's what he was. That's what the UFC put out for him, and that's what Ngannou rejected. Now, he rejected it because they didn't believe in his, that Ngannou wanted. Ngannou was biting off more than he could chew. He was, making demands about being a free agent. In the meantime, being able to box and get these big boxing fights that in reality I don't think he could have got, because he's not a massive star, which is why the UFC were going to let him go. I believe if you look at the numbers, him and Cyril Gane they only did 300k buys. So I think that's why the UFC was so, were pretty happy to let Ngannou go. He turned down that money. The UFC were bending their arm for him. They wanted him there. They've offered him about 6 million quid. People do not get offered 6 million quid. They shut him down, or he shut them down. Sorry. And after that, after he said no to that fucking offer that the UFC made, they were like, "Well, there's nothing more we can do. Get out of here. We're not having you. We're not having you. That's sort of how the UFC works. You belong to them, or you don't at all." Now, you can argue back and forth whether if that's a good thing for the fighters. I personally think it is, but that's probably because I have slightly higher T than people like Ariel Helwani and other MMA journalists. But now, putting all that aside, so that was the history of how we got to this point. So now, after Ngannou's had numerous negotiations with other MMA promotions, BKFC, etc., etc., he finally, he has a deal with PFL. And now I will list out this deal for you. So, it is only for 2 or 3 fights. So he's not going to be there for a massive amount of time. I reckon, 2 or 3 fights. You can, depending on how active Ngannou's going to be once he starts fighting, and we'll get to that because that's a big deal as well. He won't be there for too long. Guarantees a high 7-figure purse for each fight. Now, I'm interested in that. I reckon he's going to be making 2-3 mil a fight. I think it's very unlikely that he'll be making more, and that is because PFL isn't a huge organisation. Every MMA organisation has a lot of money, but PFL doesn't have the most money, compared to other organisations. So I reckon, high 7-figure, you can 9 million's a high 7-figure. I don't think it's going to be anything like that, because otherwise he'd bleed the fucking company dry. He'd bankrupt them. So I don't think that's really going to happen. I think we'll be looking at 2 million a fight, which, divided by 2 million times 3, 6, yes. Which so he would have been making the same money staying at the UFC. A split of the event's net profits, so all other profits coming in after that pay-per-view and Ngannou has access to, or he gets an amount or percentage of that. That is good. That is a plus size. Good for him. A signing bonus or salary to serve as your brand ambassador. Okay, so that's just something to help boost his name, because he wants to boost his name, and that moves us on to the next rights, where he has the right to box with people. He has non-exclusive rights with regards to boxing, no champion clause or other extensions. So basically, he can go and box whenever he wants, and a minimum salary is 1 million for his opponent. Yeah, I think that's more of a publicity thing than anything. I don't think Ngannou really cares about that. But I want to talk about the boxing thing, and I want to talk about why it might not work out in his favour. Now, going back to what we already spoke about, he made he sold 300k pay-per-views against Cyril Gane. That had everything that you'd want in a heavyweight fight. It had a big marketable guy at the time in Francis Ngannou. I'm sure you remember after the Stipe fight, a bunch of fucking idiots. I don't really want to get into it. We're calling Francis Ngannou the next Mike Tyson, which was, yeah, I mean, I was never buying that angle, but he was definitely, you couldn't call it, he was the biggest heavyweight name. You couldn't, reject that against a up and coming, very exciting heavyweight who, Cyril Gane, who held an interim title. So this, there is a story here. These two guys, had trained together in the past. The extent of their training has been some debate, but there is history here, which is sometimes more than you can get in heavyweights. And there's a story to be told, and that's all you need. And then it's up to Cyril Gane and Ngannou to tell the tale. And that they fumbled the bag, they fuck it. Does 300k pay-per-views. They're too lazy to promote it apparently. So and that's that. I mean, it wasn't a particularly strong card, to be fair, and Ngannou has no control over that. But he could have. 300k is not acceptable for a heavyweight champion of the world. Stipe was selling more than that. And people like to talk about Stipe not being a particularly promotable heavyweight. So I think, that is another, and that 300k is important. That is why the UFC were willing to let him go after the negotiations fell through. He's not a draw. He's not a draw. I want you to think: Are you going to be watching his fights in PFL? I'm not. I'm not fucking watching PFL. I'm not watching anything outside the UFC. You can call me whatever fucking words you want. Casual. Yeah, okay. Have fun fucking staying up at stupid o'clock every fucking, every weekday watching some fucking B-League MMA organisation. Watching Ngannou knock out fucking Deliha and some other big Polish cunts at PFL. I guess at least you're a hardcore. Good for you. I'm going to be enjoying my time watching, high level competition in the UFC. So the reason why I think it's good, this boxing stuff isn't going to work in the long term. 300k pay-per-views, but boxing is an evil world, and they want the best of the best for their champions. 300k in your last pay-per-view with everything riding behind it. Cyril Gane, who's more, believe it or not, guys, I might think that Cyril Gane is a bit more of a name than Ante Deliha. Maybe. I don't want to put anything out, up until fucking Ante Deliha might be the only PFL fighters some people know. There is no name value in PFL. If you're the only MMA fan out of your friends, do you think they fucking watch PFL? You got to think about it like this, casuals buy like boxing events because of big name values and shit like that. And Ngannou doesn't have that. He's not going to do well in boxing. For reference, Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk generated 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, apparently, and that might not even be all of it. Yeah, okay, no, it is. It's 1.2 million. As of reference, 300k is not compared. Ngannou's gonna fucking do a PFL fight, knock out Ante Deliha, and jump to boxing, and they're gonna eat him alive, and they're gonna fuck him. You know, Eddie Hearn, these cash cows, Frank Warren, all the except these other cats at heavyweight. That's all I can think of right now in terms of promotion. They're gonna eat him alive. You know, he's not gonna sell against Ante Delija as well. That's another problem. You know what you can put in the comments below. I'd love to know, because I'm shooting for like one. I want to be optimistic and say like 120 maybe against Ante Delija, and I think that's me being incredibly optimistic. So I'd like you to let me know, what you think Ngannou's going to get in terms of pay-per-view buys when he fights Ante Delija. Now, another thing that I want to talk about. He's going to lose more name value. Now, I know, he's got the brand ambassador, he's got stuff like that. No. He's not fighting, apparently, till the middle of next year. He's not fighting until 2024. All that's going to happen is that his name value is going to deteriorate further. People are going to fucking forget about him. The MMA world, there's so much going on. People are forgetting about him. They're not forgetting about him, I shouldn't say that. But he's not at the front of people's minds, especially in terms of heavyweights. We're now thinking of Pavlovich, we're thinking of Jones. Almeida's just came through, everyone's going to start talking about him. The UFC are going to be pushing the heavyweight division more than ever, which is why I'm excited about Ngannou leaving, because now we can get the wheels running, we can get these matchups going. Jones versus Stipe is going to sell way more than fucking Ngannou versus Toilet Plumber at PFL. I just don't think it's the best move for him. It's a win. I get it, right? He is making a fuck ton of money, okay? And he gets to box whoever he wants, and maybe that's all he ever, But that isn't all he ever wanted. It was always about money, because he wanted to box for the money. Obviously he is a boxer first and foremost in terms of how he fights, but he wanted money. This is why this whole thing, he saw fucking Tyson Fury, and he saw the his eyes lit up green, fucking thinking of money. He's not going to get that. I really think this boxing stuff's going to fall through. I just can't, maybe I'll be wrong in the future, but I can't really see that happening. I want to shut up. So to summarise, the deal is good. The deal is a win, but it's not the win he wanted. He wanted to stay in the UFC under that contract that they would give, they offered him in regards to the 6-7 mil, and then go out and be a free agent and box. So, did he win? No. Is he going to do better? We don't even know. He might fucking flop a PFL. He might ruin PFL if you care about it, and if you do care about PFL, by the way, you're a nerd. He might, he's going to bleed the fucking organisation dry. Unless, he's... I don't know where the fuck they're going to get all that money from, Especially if he asks for more every fight. We're talking about high 7-figure, so maybe high 7-figure becomes, 4 mil, then 5 mil, then, fucking 6 mil. He's gonna ruin PFL because people aren't buying that fucking thing. Do you know what I mean? So maybe he'll make money from his sponsors. Okay, good, but still, I just don't think it's what he really wanted in the end. It's kind of like there's been all this talk, all this fucking jibber jabber, and now over a year later, in terms of it's basically been 2 years that this narrative's been going on. He comes out with this contract, and I just don't think it's the best thing for him, to be honest. And I don't think it's really a win. It's not a win. It's enough. Well done. You're doing enough. Alright, thank you.